Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome to our Middle East, here from Jerusalem. The main question today, how can the Iranian people of today create the free and democratic Iran of tomorrow? We've got exactly the expert that you need to hear from. Please join us. I'm very honored today to have a very special guest. Mr. Mohsen Sazegara was a former senior Iranian official, today one of the leaders of the Iran Transitional Council. Mohsen, what a pleasure and an honor it is to have you on the program, Our Middle East, and it's the most appropriate title for our conversation today. As a former official of the two Irans that you experienced, one in the Shah and one after the Shah, how do the Iranian people today take their own future in their hands with a regime that is, it seems, incorrigible? It seems impossible to penetrate this regime.
Good day, Dan. Thank you for having me in your fantastic program. Big question. Let me put it on this way. The people like me in my age, I can say that we have seen actually two paradigms, if I borrow the word from Thomas Kuhn. The paradigm of revolutionary ideas, anti-imperialism, anti-Israel, the pro-Vietnam War, pro-Palestinian War. That was the dominant discourse when I was a young student, and the present paradigm in our society, not only in Iran but in the world, dominant discourse in Iran right now is democracy, human rights, the justice, gender justice, and several other things that now the young generation believe in, that, producing that, everybody, accepts that. So a paradigm shift has happened in Iran, like many other places in the world. And the problem in Iran, present Iran, is that we have a regime that still lives in previous paradigm. Not only it believes in a leftist ideological revolutionary version of Islam, but besides to that, they are still thinking of a type of utopia based on returning to Sharia, to religious orders, Islamic religious orders, that many of them belong to Middle Ages and doesn't work in present day. Like what is happening in Afghanistan, Taliban, for instance, or Iran, a Shia version of Taliban, or ISIS, or other groups like that. So this contradiction between a people who has moved to a new paradigm and a regime that lives in previous paradigm is one of the basis and foundations of a big conflict in Iran, and the biggest struggle of the people of Iran to get rid of this regime.
You know, Mohsen, it's quite ironic, your analysis here, because back in the revolutionary days of 1979, when the original revolution took place, it was actually the convergence of liberal left Western ideas and let's call them the perhaps Islamist-driven revolutionaries in Iran that created the revolution. But now you're saying, if I understand you correctly, that the current paradigm in Iran has moved from left third worldism, let's call it liberation, national liberation. They still called it human rights then, but now you're saying that it's a progressive, really Western paradigm that is really grabbing the people of Iran, that is embracing them. We're seeing it in the United States. We're seeing it in Western Europe. So it's funny, within left ideology, there's even been a shift in Iran towards progressivism in the Western U.S. understanding of the word and the idea.
I prefer to use instead of the word left because the Labour Party in England or Democrat Party in the U.S. are we consider them left groups, leftists, or any social democrats in Western Europe. I prefer to use the word of communist. On those days, I mean, the previous paradigm of Iran society, some of our educated people looked at West, but they chose Marxism from the Western the civilization instead of liberal ideas, instead of the democratic thinkers. It's a long story. I don't want to enter that, why it happened, why Marxism became the dominant ideology. And we, when I say we, I mean Muslim activists. We tried to imitate Marxism and make a version of Islam that I can call it a Marxism version of Islam. If you look at to the books of some thinkers like Ali Shariati, actually he was the teacher of revolution. He passed away 1 year before victory of revolution. Now, when you go back and reread and read his books, easily you find out that he tries to borrow the main ideas of Marxism and just Islamization of Marxism, I call it. Unfortunately, now that time is over. I chose the word of paradigm because when you live in a paradigm like sciences, everybody think in that paradigm, in that discourse. Everything is produced inside that. But when a paradigm shift happens, the new paradigm, everybody now shift to the new paradigm and produce in this paradigm. I mean, this is actually the main shift in society of Iran. And this is something that I can say that the present rulers of Iran, especially the leader, they don't understand it.
So here you have 90. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I mean, they think that they can prevent a society, progress of a society, a progressive society. They suppress the people. They create fearness in the society, threat the people, and think that by such methods they can prevent a society from changing. That it's useless. I mean, just they create more troubles for Iranians, more brutality and more murdering.
So we're really talking about an Iran of tomorrow that's a liberal democracy. I mean, this is really quite a revolutionary conversation, actually, when we've moved from an Islamic adoption, if you will, of Marxist ideas to a liberal democracy, the way the West likes to look at itself. Help us understand how the Iran of tomorrow as a liberal democracy looks like. How are people envisioning their society? You've said 90% of the Iranian people favor the ideas that you're talking about right now.
I really did not like the word liberal that you use, that you hire for what say liberalism. Because especially in the U.S., sometimes using the word liberal means something else. But in the essence of this word, liberalism, you talk about the rights of the people instead of the duties of the people. You know, the present regime of Iran, based on religious regime, they talk only about the duties of the people. This is how the religion works. As a religious man, you have some duties to do. You should do some things if you believe in a religion. Okay, in your private belief, it's okay. But when you come to a society and instead of regulations based on the will of the society, instead of that, you have just religious duties. This is something else. But in liberalism, we are talking about a human that has rights, the human rights. This is the word that now people of Iran insist on that. I see sometimes, I really like that. I see sometimes that these moral police that stop some young girls of Iran and try to push them for imposed hijab, they answered that, okay, you believe in hijab, you wear that, but I don't. And this is my right to wear whatever I want. This is something that in my generation was absent. We didn't think about that. Anyway, tomorrow Iran is, as you phrase it, a liberal democracy, a democracy based on human rights, and definitely based on market economy, because another wing for democracy is economy, market economy, instead of a governmental economy. And in accordance with the move of the culture and economy in the world, I call it globalization. Now we live in a global world, really, and I think that every nation should try to get a good position in the universal trend of production of wealth, economic production, and cultural production. As much as a nation can have a better situation in this global trend, that nation has a better place in the world. And Iran tomorrow will be a secular democracy based on human rights, working with the world and participate in the trend of globalization in the world.
So how do we get from a regime ironclad, prison today? Because at the end of the day, the 85 to 88 million women and men and children of Iran are really prisoners of the regime. And for 44 years, there have been, as you are well aware, and you've been so active as a leader in many of these different efforts towards democratization over the decades. How can the Iranian people change this regime? Can they actually democratize their own country? Or does it require an external event, a military event, a political event, a combination of the two in order to change the regime? It seems that the regime has been very resilient and very sophisticated in avoiding their own collapse.
And besides the sophistication and resilience, they have the support of two dictatorships, Chinese dictatorship and Russian dictatorships. And they try to have to import their facilities from them and the technologies from them and know-how of dictatorship and suppression of the people from these two countries. But, Dan, first of all, I believe that like Russian doll, all the other dolls come out of the main one, which is the change of the dominant discourse of the society. That paradigm shift that I talked about, it has happened in Iran. Later or soon, this regime will be overthrown by the people. And how in practice, I understand there are lots of dangers in front of the people, in front of Iran. We may have for a while a failed state. It may happen. I don't deny it. Or because of the terrorism of this regime, we might be under attack. When I say we, I mean Iranian, by a military strike against Iran. But if you ask me how the people can get rid of this regime, I have only one answer: civil resistance. Civil resistance has worked for in more than 60 countries during last 70 years, 60 years. It's people power, believe in people power, based on three pillars of civil resistance: protests, paralyzing the regime and strikes, and defection from the regime. These three parts of civil resistance should move together and mobilize the people. This is the way that if we go through that, the change to establish a democracy after overthrowing this regime is more than any other types of struggle against this regime. Fortunately, we have protests, not only street protests, but other types of protests like riding on walls, hanging the banners or riding on the regime banners, or many other tactics. In recent events in Iran during last year, our friends in Iran collected the new innovations in tactics. Totally about 50 more tactics were created by Iranians that I sent the list to Michael Beer, the writer of the book of civil resistance tactics in 21st century. He has collected 346 tactics, and I can say that we Iranians donated 50 more to that collection. For instance, cutting the hair by women was one of the tactics, protest tactics to impose the job that became famous in the world. And for paralyzing the regime, for going to strikes, I can tell you that right now, average every day out of 84,000 industrial factories of Iran, in average we have 1,000 factories on a strike. In the teachers, the health department, in journalists, every part of Iran, I mean, civil society of Iran, we have protests, we have demands. Our problem is that how connect them together. And in strikes, whenever you succeed to have country all over country strikes on two parts of the economy: energy and transportation. These two parts, if you can have a general strike in these two parts, then everything will stop. And we're working on that. When I say we, I mean the activists in Iran and outside Iran. And defection, the third part, it has gone more than what I expected, than what I expected. Because let me give you a figure from an evaluation from Ministry of Intelligence. I quote from their internal and secret reports. They say that 3 years ago, 2019, November 2019, now it's 4 years ago, only 1% of the members of IRGC, Revolutionary Guard, and Basij, the militia, had problem to suppress the people. But during last year, they said that something between 65 to 70% of the members of IRGC and Basij got problem to suppress the people. Mm-hmm. In one of the evaluations, they had an exact figure: 68% of them got problem to suppress the people and disobeyed the commanders. They didn't come. Basij is, by definition, is a voluntary organization. They had problem to bring them to the garrisons and send them to streets, even if they paid them, but they didn't come. I mean, the fiction right now, not only in IRGC, Basij, or police, they have problems, but in inner circles as well, like a Minister of Intelligence, IRGC intelligence. So as much as the people struggle goes ahead, I mean, in protest, in paralyzing the regime, then the fiction will be accelerated. In civil resistance, we have a special, graph that shows that how they are related to each other.
Let's go into for a moment the why behind the defections. Are regime officials in IRGC and even Basij aware that at the end of the day people want to be free, or are they defecting because of fear themselves that ultimately the regime will fall and they will be prosecuted, they could even be condemned to death? What's behind the defection? What's behind the cracks in the regime wall?
All of them. Yes, some of them fear from the future. Many of them are the member of that society. They live in that society and see that how the people are dissatisfied with this regime. The third one I can say is the presence of the women in struggles. They have problem to confront the girls, the women. Many of them don't like to fight with women on the other side. We had many reports that many of them said that, we see our cousin amongst the people who are protesting, or sometimes their sisters, their mothers, their wives. One of the commanders of IRGC in Syria, fighting in Syria, returned to Iran last year because, I don't know his name, but I quote from one of the inner reports of the regime that says that he returned to Iran because his wife was arrested amongst the protesters. But I think that something that might be more than effective, more than any other reason, is the corruption of the regime. They don't believe in what the leader and other clergy and the officials of the regime claim. Corruption not only in economy, but moral corruptions as well. And they don't believe in the regime anymore. And the slogans of the regime, anti-US, anti-Israel, they have seen that they wanna just pick the money and pour it in their pockets, billions of dollars. Let me tell you again, quoting from one of the commanders of Revolutionary Guard in one of the provinces of Iran, that in the meeting with the leader, he says that how I can answer to one of my staff when he comes to me and say and show me a photo, the watch at the hand over the hand of a son of Ali Shamkhani, who was the member of the secretary of the High National Security Council of the country, and shows me and says that the price of this watch is more than 4 years of my salary. How can I answer to him and persuade him that, okay, go and defend this regime? I mean, the billions of dollars that they steal from the people of Iran, many of them, their family, I mean, top officials, their families live in Canada, in the US, in Western countries. And every day you can, see their photos in the social media that they are living in luxury styles. So this injustice, this corruption, and many other things that they have seen, many lies from the top officials, so the middle levels and low levels of this regime don't believe in whatever they say, and this is another reason that they defect from the regime.
So let's look at the West for a second. Let's consider what you've just been talking about. You've been talking about the values of a liberal democracy. The values of a liberal democracy: transparency, self-criticism, exposing corruption, good government, best practices, civil rights, human rights, women's rights. And here you have the West that subscribes to all of those values. And yet when we watch the United States, and frequently the European powers as well, they legitimize, securitize the regime at every turn. Something is disconnected here because the values of the West are colliding with the behavior of the West with regard to the regime. How do we what is it that the West is not understanding about the regime, or maybe they don't want to understand?
I don't know. Maybe I have talked to some, governments in Western countries. Sometimes they say that they want to prevent more dangers from this regime, especially Europeans. Sometimes they say that they don't see any alternative to this regime. They don't believe that the opposition succeed to bring down this regime. But by the way, I agree with you. Some of the behaviors of the governments, Western governments, is not based on the liberal democracy values, the civil rights, human rights, and let me tell you the quote, one of the Western politicians during Green Movement. He said that, yes, we have sympathy for you, but our pockets are with the regime. In private, he said. Maybe economic benefits they have. This is why sometimes Iranians in exile, diaspora, when they protest the Western governments. For instance, on these days, Iranians emphasize for more pressure on IRGC, and especially European governments, they don't accept it. They say that we should spend lots of money if we put IRGC in the list of terrorism. So we should spend about, I don't know why, but they say that it costs for us 1 trillion euros. This is the reason that, okay, we stop here and we don't do that. I don't know if the figure is right or wrong, but anyway, it's not based on the Western values.
Yeah, it's a very regretful collision between values and political behavior. I mean, it seems to be one of the complicating factors. Here's another complicating factor. when we look at the opposition over the last 44 years, there has been a lot of fighting in the family, if you will. And I'm wondering how much of this is cultural, because, Iran is a mosaic of Shia, also of Sunna, of Azeris, of Baluchis. I mean, you have many different groups within Iran that call themselves Iranian. The question is, what is it that prevents a more unified opposition from emerging? And I know that this is one of the things, as a leader of the Iran Transitional Council, that you're working for unity and for understanding among the opposition. Help us understand the soul or the conflicted souls of the opposition and why it's been so difficult over 44 years to create a more unified inside and outside leadership.
In Iran Transition Council, we have a simple formula for that. We say that we have agreement on 5 basic principles. Mm-hmm. The unity of the country and the people of Iran, secular democracy for Iran, human rights, and the annexes of that, overthrowing this regime, passing from this regime to, or no reform inside the regime is available, and choosing civil resistance for a struggle against this regime instead of violent guerrilla wars or armed struggle. And we understand we can have agreement on these principles, basic principles, and we understand that we have 2 difficulties. First, a symbol of the country, secular democracy, parliamentary democracy. The symbol of the country, if a king or a president, elected president, because we have 2 factions in the opposition. We have good agreement. In ITC, we say that we will ask the people of Iran, after overthrowing this regime, this is the choice of the people of Iran. They should vote in the next constitution of Iran. And second, the centralism versus federalism, if I can phrase it like that. How much? We agree that as much as possible, people should run the area that they are living. Try that help the people to elect any parts of their province, their city, whatever. But we can't draw it right now. We can't say that how much it is. We will have agreement on that. This is the principle that we agreed that people should govern themselves as much as possible in every part of Iran. But how, this is another thing that we think that should be defined in next constitution and many regulations in the future of Iran by the people of Iran. We can't say it right now. We can't just talk about the principle. And this formula then works. Based on this formula, unity on the agreeable principles and leaving 2 things to the future of Iran and will of the people of Iran has worked in ITC, and now I can call it a cooperation pact that 6 different groups, one of them is royalist, the others are different factions. With ITC, we have a cooperation pact based on such an idea, and we are trying to expand it to many other groups.
Well, Mohsen, what is fascinating here as we begin to wind up our conversation is that what we're talking about here is moving from the Islamic Republic of Iran to the Federal Democratic Republic of Iran, which is a nice way of putting the new nomenclature of a free and democratic Iran in the future, the Federal Democratic Republic of Iran. And when I say those words, a lot of the Federalist ideas come from the United States political thinking, the Federalist Papers, Jacksonian democracy. I'm wondering really now on this program whether this type of intellectual discourse could be very helpful. The Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, of which I have the honor of serving as president, has been one of the leading expert institutes in the idea of federalism. And we have thought about how to apply federalism, the ideas behind shared power and shared control, not only over territory, but over political ideas and political control, extending those ideas to other areas of the world. And what I think this conversation has showed us is that some of these great thinkers of the American political tradition, the historical tradition, could actually be helpful in helping thought leaders and political leaders like yourself and the Transitional Council to think through some of these ideas for a future democratic Iran. What do you think about that?
I can't promise that the future Iran will be a federal democratic Iran. Choosing the word of federalism, because, Iran has the history of 2,500 years of centralism.
Right.
It started from Darius the Great. It depends on the people of Iran in the future. But what I can say, definitely I can say right now, that I like in the U.S. Society as well, and the founding fathers of this great country, is helping the people to elect and to govern themselves in the lowest layers of the society to the top. This is something that I think help for establishment of democracy more than anything. In this country that I live right now, in the U.S., police, every mayor, every governor, every tax should be ratified by the parliament of every state. It comes from bottom to top, not from top to bottom. And this is the way that I think that we can have. And now we have agreement on that. But, if in the future people of Iran call it a federal Iran, I have no problem if, but what I can promise is that in every province of Iran, people should elect the governor, people should elect the parliament of that province, and in every city, the forces, everything should be elected by the people. The government of by the people, for the people, and running by the people. This is something that I think that now everybody agrees on that.
A government of the people, by the people. Boy, it certainly sounds like some of the founding principles of the United States Constitution.
Exactly.
There you are in the capital of the United States, and I've had the honor of meeting you there and of them meeting you in other countries and other places. And it's really been an honor to discuss some of these ideas. This has really been a discussion about the soul of Iran. It's the political, social, economic soul of a people that is one of the, I think, most talented and most brilliant people with a great history. And in fact, I can tell you that Cyrus the Great was one of the most enlightened leaders that allowed the Jewish people to come back to Jerusalem and reestablish their temple and worship in freedom. So we have the Iranian people and the Jewish people in their Jewish homeland have a great history. And here we're talking about the Judeo-Christian values of the American people, embracing the Iranian people on the basis of democracy, of people power, of bottom-up freedoms. It's been a great discussion about the soul of people, and as Natan Sharansky says, building a free society out of a fierce society. And so I hope we'll continue these discussions. I think there's a lot the American people actually can help the Iranian people with, having these discussions about the notions of freedom in whatever political context, whether it's more centralist or more federal, but certainly people joined in freedom. Mohsen Sazegara, one of the leaders of the Iranian Transitional Council and a former senior official of two very different Irans. Thank you so much for joining us on Our Middle East and sharing with us the soul of the Iranian people.
Thank you for having me, Dan. And I hope the future will be a good friendship between Israel and Iran. We have historical ties, as you said.
Inshallah, Bezrat Hashem, as we say in Hebrew, God willing, we say in English. I look forward to seeing you very soon, God willing. Thanks so much, Mohsen.